Lena Lai is on the telephone with us right now in that area. Lena, fill us in with more.
Hi, Jimmy. Yeah, like you said, it's simply amazing. We are at West 25th and Seymour in Cleveland at the 2200 block of Seymour, where about an hour ago, neighbors tell me that they heard a woman about 30 years old banging on their door, and she had with her a young baby.
I'm Amanda Berry.
You need police, fire, or ambulance?
I need police.
Okay, and what's going on there?
I've been kidnapped and I've been missing for 10 years, and I'm here. I'm free now.
Okay, and what's your address?
2207 Seymour Avenue.
2207 Seymour. Looks like you're calling me from 2210.
You heard screaming.
Heard screaming. I meet my McDonald's. I come outside. I see this girl going nuts, trying to get out of her house. So I go on the porch. I go on the porch, and she says, "Help me get out. I've been in here a long time." So I figured it's a domestic violence dispute. So I open the door, and we can't get in that way because how the door is, it's so much that the body can't fit through, only your hand. So we kick the bottom, and she comes out with the little girl, and she says, "Call 911. My name was Amanda Berry.
Did you know who that was when she said that?
When she told me, it didn't register until I got the call in 911, and I'm like, I'm calling the 911 for Amanda Berry. I thought this girl was dead. You know what I mean? And she got on the phone and she said, "Yes, this is me." And the detective Cook, right here, Detective Gregory Cook says, "Charles, do you know?"
She vanished from daylight. 3 young women snatched from their lives between 2002 and 2004, and kept hidden for over a decade in plain sight. They lived under masks in the same house, just blocks away from where their families raided flyers, haunted by silence. The first, Michelle Knight, walked into captivity as a distressed mother in 2002, getting into a car with a man she thought she trusted. She was 21, fighting for custody of her son, then vanished into a nightmare. A year later, Amanda Berry, nearly 17, disappeared after leaving her shift at Burger King. Then Gina DeJesus, just 14, walking home from school in 2004, was lured into a brutal trap. Each abduction seemed isolated, but all 3 shared the same fate. Ariel Castro's White House on Seymour Avenue in Cleveland's Tremont neighborhood. Police drew blanks. Their families did everything: flyers, interviews, vigils. Yet, nothing changed. Each disappearance became a case file, then a cold case. Michelle's case remained mostly ignored. Authorities wrote it off as a missing adult. Gina's parents demanded an Amber Alert that never came. Amanda's mother was told her daughter was likely gone forever. And so the waiting began. Inside that house, each woman endured the unthinkable. Michelle bore the brunt of brutality, forced to help deliver Amanda's baby on Christmas. Amanda gave birth in captivity, the first sign of new life amid horror. Gina was isolated in darkness, slowly stripped of identity. For 10 years, they whispered in shadows, shared hidden strength, and clung together in a house rigged with locks, boarded-up windows, and unspoken dread. In the spring of 2013, something broke. Not violent, not planned, just chance. Amanda crawled behind a storm door that wasn't fully locked. She broke through a screen, stuck her arm out, and screamed. That scream pierced the silence of 2 lives hidden in the next rooms. Neighbors responded. Charles Ramsey kicked in a door. And suddenly, the world was watching the rescue of the impossible. 3 women emerging into daylight after years without hope. Calling 911 from a neighbor's porch, Amanda said, "Help me. I've been kidnapped. I've been missing for 10 years. I am free." Police arrived moments later. Gina appeared, shaking, terrified. Then Michelle, holding her ground, stepping into chaos as though waking from decades of bewildering sleep. It wasn't cinematic. It was raw. The women had no warning. No heroes scripted their return. They had only each other and the instincts that survived, and a world they no longer recognized. In the days that followed, the captor Ariel Castro was arrested. charged with nearly 1,000 counts: kidnapping, rape, torture. Less than 2 months later, he was dead, claimed by his own hands in prison. Amanda, Gina, and Michelle were not defined by headlines or movies. They were individuals reclaiming identity. Amanda returned to her family with her 6-year-old daughter. Gina got involved in missing persons advocacy. Michelle changed her name, wrote a memoir. But they remained haunted by memories, by separation, by a childhood stolen. This is not just a story of rescue. It's a story of endurance, of the human spirit refusing to break. What the world saw on the day Amanda Berry screamed for help was just the final page of a book they'd never read. What came before it, the years of isolation, confusion, and survival, had been hidden from the public eye, tucked away behind boarded windows and locked basement doors. That house on Seymour Avenue wasn't just a place of confinement. It was a machine of silence, where time stopped and terror was repeated like routine. When Michelle Knight was lured into that house in 2002, she had no idea she wouldn't leave again for over a decade. She was 21, older than the other girls, but she was also vulnerable, estranged from her family, homeless at times, and desperately trying to regain custody of her son. Ariel Castro promised her a ride. She thought she was being helped. Minutes later, she was tied up in the basement. There was no light, just chains, duct tape, filth. He kept her there for days before moving her upstairs. Over the months, she was starved, beaten, and raped. Her wrists were mangled from the chains. Her spirit, however, didn't break. Michelle was the first. She endured alone for nearly a year before Amanda arrived. Amanda's kidnapping in 2003 struck the city harder. She was just shy of 17 and had called her sister moments before disappearing after a work shift. A cheerful, bright teen, Amanda had dreams of journalism and music. But those dreams were replaced by darkness. She was taken to the same house, bound, and introduced to the world Michelle had been living in alone. Amanda was defiant. She kept her mind active by imagining her future child. She listened to muffled sounds beyond the house, sirens, kids playing, even her own name on the news, proof that the world was still out there. Inside, she and Michelle rarely saw one another at first. Castro kept them isolated, only letting them interact in brief, cautious moments. Then, in 2004, Gina DeJesus was taken, just 14 years old. It happened during daylight, on her way home from school. She was a friend of Castro's daughter. That familiarity is what lowered her guard. She trusted him. In seconds, her world vanished. Gina was the baby of the group, the quiet one. Castro manipulated her with fake kindness at first, telling her she wasn't like the others, promising she'd go home soon. But those promises turned into punishments. The same cycle of control. Her family, devastated, never stopped searching. Her father even unknowingly comforted Castro on the street during a vigil. Now, 3 girls shared the same house, each in their own version of hell. They were sometimes kept in separate rooms, sometimes locked together. They were given little food. They bathed once a week, if that. The television was their only connection to life outside, but even that was filtered through Castro's control. Holidays passed, seasons changed, but inside, time didn't move. Michelle lost count of the years. Amanda scratched days into the wall. Gina stopped looking at calendars. The brutality was specific. Michelle suffered the worst. Castro saw her as expendable, less connected, less likely to be missed. She became the target of his violent rage. She was pregnant multiple times but was beaten until she miscarried. Amanda, however, was allowed to carry her baby to term. She gave birth in an inflatable kiddie pool with Michelle forced to act as midwife. Castro warned them, if the baby died, Michelle would die too. That child, born in captivity, became Amanda's reason to survive. She named her Jocelyn. Castro allowed the girl to move freely around the house, even taking her outside briefly, always under threat and strict rules. Amanda taught Jocelyn to call Castro Daddy and told her the other women were roommates. It was a twisted version of family, a surreal performance of normalcy in the most unnatural setting. Michelle never had that chance. Her connection to her son had been stolen. She sometimes heard Castro talking about him. That was his power. He used hope like a weapon. Even as the years dragged on, the girls clung to whatever pieces of themselves they could. Amanda kept journals. Gina hummed music. Michelle braided their hair, whispered encouragement. They had nothing, but they had each other. And that kept them alive. Outside, their families were shattered in different ways. Amanda's mother, Luana Miller, had appeared on talk shows, searched relentlessly, even consulted psychics. She died in 2006 of heart failure, never knowing Amanda was still alive. Gina's parents fought to keep her story alive, partnering with police, lobbying for alerts. Michelle's case barely stayed on file. Her name faded from public attention. She was an adult runaway, they said. But she was there the whole time, just a few miles away. When Amanda finally saw a sliver of light through that front door in 2013, it wasn't hope. It was instinct. Jocelyn had said something odd. "Daddy's not here." The door, usually locked in layers, was partially unsealed. Amanda didn't know if it was a trap. She took the risk anyway. She screamed. She kicked. She found help. And in doing so, she didn't just escape. She unlocked freedom for all three of them. There was no ceremony, no grand rescue team. It was raw, messy, chaotic. Charles Ramsey, a neighbor, helped her out. Police arrived. Michelle and Gina were pulled from their rooms. Amanda's daughter was carried into sunlight for the first time. What happened after that, how they faced the cameras, told their stories, and tried to become whole again, is just beginning. Their rescue wasn't the end of the story. It was the start of something entirely different. Public attention, media frenzies, trauma therapy, and the struggle to piece together lives that had been violently paused for over a decade. The world wanted answers. The press descended on Cleveland like a storm, and each headline carried a version of their nightmare. But for Amanda, Michelle, and Gina, the noise outside didn't compare to the silence they had survived inside. Amanda Berry was the first to step forward. She made the 911 call that changed everything. Her voice, though shaking, carried the urgency of every year she'd spent behind that locked door. "Help me," she pleaded. "I'm Amanda Berry. I've been kidnapped and I've been missing for 10 years, and I'm here. I'm free now." That voice, once hidden in a basement, now echoed across the world. The police arrived within minutes. Officers kicked open the front door of 2207 Seymour Avenue and stormed inside. What they found wasn't just a house. It was a crime scene frozen in time. Rooms with padlocks on the outside, chains bolted to walls, filthy mattresses, a refrigerator with spoiled food, children's toys beside restraints. The contradictions were chilling. Michelle Knight was the last to emerge. She was thinner than they expected. Her body carried years of abuse, and her eyes didn't flinch. She had learned not to. When they asked for her name, she gave it. But many officers didn't recognize it. Her case had never received the same attention. That fact would linger in the years to come. But Michelle didn't return for validation. She wanted her life back. Gina DeJesus walked out into a sea of flashing lights and disbelief. Her family had never stopped looking for her. Posters bearing her face had faded over the years, but now she was home. Her mother fell to her knees when she saw her. It was like touching a ghost that suddenly became flesh and blood again. Amanda's daughter, Jocelyn, was confused. The outside world was new, loud, and uncontrolled. She had never attended school, never walked freely through a grocery store. Everything she knew about life came from inside that house. Her mother's strength had shaped her. But now, she would need a new kind of protection. And then there was Ariel Castro. He was arrested that same day without resistance. At first, he claimed innocence, then shifted to deflection. He said he was sick, not a monster. He told investigators he had been abused as a child. But the evidence was overwhelming. Diaries, DNA, physical injuries, confessions. He had kept journals too. Proof of calculated, sustained cruelty. In July 2013, Castro was indicted on 977 criminal counts, including kidnapping, rape, and aggravated murder for the forced miscarriages Michelle had suffered. The case never went to trial. In August, he accepted a plea deal. Life in prison without parole, plus 1,000 years. During the sentencing, he rambled in court, blaming everyone but himself. Amanda, Gina, and Michelle sat in the courtroom, unmoved. They didn't need his apology. They needed distance. A month later, on September 3rd, 2013, Ariel Castro was found dead in his prison cell. He had hanged himself with a bedsheet. Some called it justice. Others called it an escape. But to the women he hurt, it didn't change anything. He was gone, but the damage remained. What happened next was harder than anyone expected. Freedom wasn't simple. It came with questions, therapy, interviews, and triggers. Amanda Berry gave her first interview months later and described how difficult it was to even sleep in a bed. The quiet, she said, was too loud. Michelle Knight changed her name to Lily Rose Lee and began writing her story. Her memoir, Finding Me, would later become a bestseller. She became a symbol of resilience, not because of what she endured, but because of how she chose to live afterward. She spoke at women's shelters, advocated for missing persons, and rebuilt her life without apologies. Gina DeJesus returned home to a close-knit family that embraced her fiercely. She stayed out of the public eye longer than Amanda or Michelle, focusing instead on healing privately. But in time, she too found her voice. She co-founded the Cleveland Family Center for Missing Children and Adults, determined to help other families avoid what hers had suffered. Together, the three survivors didn't just reclaim their lives, they helped redefine what survival looks like. They refused to let Castro's story define theirs. They refused to be the girls in the basement. They were women who endured, who overcame, and who now stood in the light. There are still scars. Michelle still struggles with trust. Amanda, now raising a teenage daughter, occasionally looks over her shoulder. Gina still feels most safe at home. But they live. They speak. They laugh. And they love. Their story reminds us that monsters sometimes live next door, but so do heroes. And sometimes, the strongest ones are the people we once forgot to look for. A decade in darkness doesn't end with a sunrise. For Amanda, Gina, and Michelle, freedom wasn't a finish line. It was the beginning of a different kind of fight. The media frenzy faded, but the hard parts didn't. Each woman had to learn to live in a world that had kept moving without them, while they were trapped in time. Amanda Berry tried to build something steady for her daughter, Jocelyn. Imagine trying to raise a child who had only known captivity, who saw chains and bolted doors as normal. Amanda had shielded her from the worst, but now, in the open world, she had to help Jocelyn understand what wasn't normal. It was like learning to breathe all over again. Amanda also took on a public role, not because she wanted to, but because someone had to speak. She became a voice for the voiceless, advocating for missing children, hosting a local news segment that spotlighted the lost and forgotten. Each case she featured reminded her of the years when no one saw her, and every recovered child, every call from a grateful family, it helped stitch something back together inside her. Michelle Knight, now Lily Rose Lee, found healing in the unexpected: art, writing, and animals. She described painting as a way to pour pain onto canvas, where it could live outside her body. She adopted a dog, then another, then started fostering animals. "They trust with scars," she once said. "Just like me." But healing didn't mean forgetting. She still had nightmares. Loud noises could freeze her in place. But she moved forward. Not with denial, but with courage. Gina DeJesus slowly stepped into her own light. Her family, especially her mother, became her anchor. They'd never given up on her, and now she honored that belief by working to prevent other disappearances. She co-founded a non-profit, sat on boards, and visited schools. Gina understood the little moments that meant everything, like a girl walking home safely, or a parent sleeping without fear. That's what she fought for now. There were tough days. All three women faced people who questioned their choices, their appearances, even their truth. Some accused them of exaggerating. Others turned their trauma into tabloid headlines. But they didn't stop. They held the line for each other, and for the millions of survivors who watched them and whispered, "If they can do it, maybe I can too." And Cleveland? It didn't forget. The house at 2207 Seymour Avenue was demolished just 2 months after their rescue. The lot was left empty, an intentional scar on the landscape, a physical reminder that monsters can build walls, but they cannot make them permanent. For years after, people left flowers on that ground. Toys, handwritten notes. "We're sorry it took so long to find you. You are not alone." Michelle once said in an interview, "We weren't just locked up in that house. We were locked out of the world. But now, we're building something new." And they did. Each of them wrote books. Not just memoirs, but maps for others lost in the dark. They gave interviews. Not all the time, and not always easily. But when they did, they spoke with clarity and fire. Not bitterness, not vengeance, just truth. And truth, for them, was the ultimate act of freedom. The story of Amanda, Gina, and Michelle is not just a story of captivity. It's a story of return, of mothers and daughters, of pain and power. It reminds us that people are more than what happens to them. That sometimes, the best revenge is not rage, but resurrection. Their names don't belong in the shadows. They belong in the light. If you found this story powerful, don't let it end here. Subscribe for more real-life cases where tragedy met truth. Share this video. It could be the reason someone finally comes home. Comment below. What part of their story shook you the most? And remember, behind every missing poster is a life still hoping to be found.